Wyoming Territory, 1874, the wind howled over the dry grasslands as if it were trying to tear the past right out of her bones. Keziah Hartley stood outside the split-rail fence, sleeves rolled up, hands calloused and red from chopping wood that morning. The house behind her was small, patched with salvaged planks and weather-beaten canvas. It had been her father's. Now it was hers, and now she was alone in it again. A cry came from inside, not loud, not panicked, just a soft, tired wail that went straight through her chest. She stepped into the doorway. "I know, baby girl," she said, scooping up the 2-year-old from the cot tucked against the far wall. "I know, Ellie, Mama's right here." Ellie blinked up at her with wide brown eyes, her tiny fingers curling around Keziah's braid like it was the only thing in the world that made sense. Keziah pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "You hungry?" A second cry. This one came from the other side of the room. Ephraim, 4 years old, sat cross-legged on the floor, his face streaked with dirt and tears. His eyes didn't match his sister's, they were pale blue, almost gray, but the way he looked at Keziah was the same, like she was everything holding their world together. She crouched down, shifting Ellie to her hip. "You too, sweetheart," he nodded but said nothing. He hadn't said much since their father left 7 months ago, rode off one morning and never came back. No note, no word, just vanished. Folks in town whispered that it was no surprise. That no one would marry a girl like her, not with her kind of past, not with another man's babies, but that man had married her. Then left anyway. Keziah had heard it since she was 15. Not proper, too wild, too much fire in her. She had been born in a wagon on the trail west, raised by a father who taught her to shoot before she could read and a mother who died before she turned 12. She could break a horse, mend a fence, and shoot straighter than most men in Sweetwater. But none of that mattered. Not to the women who clutched their pearls when she walked by or the men who looked at her like something to be used and discarded. She was 23 now, and she had stopped hoping until he showed up. Late that afternoon, she heard hooves crunching over the dry earth. She stepped outside, rifle slung across her shoulder, Ellie still on her hip. The sun was low, painting everything gold. The rider was tall, broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low. Dust clung to his coat and his horse looked as worn as his boots. He stopped 10 paces from the house, dismounted in one fluid motion and looked at her like he had expected to find her right there. "You Keziah Hartley." She kept her grip on the rifle. "Who's asking?" "Name's Paxton Dwyer," he said. "I heard you had trouble with cattle rustlers 2 nights back. Someone said they heard gunshots out this way." She watched him carefully. "That was me. Shot over their heads, they ran," he nodded. "You live out here alone," she hesitated. "I have my children." He glanced at the little girl on her hip, then toward the open doorway where Ephraim peeked out, clutching the frame with both hands. "I am not here to start anything," Paxton said. "Just figured someone ought to check on you." She narrowed her eyes. "Most folks in town would rather see me gone." "I am not most folks." She stared at him, waiting for some sign, some flicker of judgment or pity, but he did not look away. "What do you want?" she asked. "Just to help." "No one helps for nothing," he shrugged. "Fair enough, I need work." "You need help. I can mend fences, dig post holes, watch the kids while you ride into town, you name it." Keziah looked him over. He was not young, not old, maybe 30. His voice was low, steady. He was not nervous, not pushy, just there. "You do not even know me," she said. "I know enough," he said. "Your husband left, you stayed, that tells me all I need." She did not answer. She could not. The words caught in her throat and her arms tightened around Ellie as if holding her babies closer might keep her whole. "I will not take charity," she said finally. "Then call it a trade," he said. "I am not here to fix you, just fix your fence." That night he slept in the barn. By morning the western fence was repaired, the creaky back door rehung, and Ephraim was following Paxton around like a shadow. "He is quiet," Paxton said, kneeling to show the boy how to sharpen a stick into a toy spear. "He does not trust easy," Keziah said from the porch. Paxton looked up. "I do not blame him." She did not answer, but something in her chest shifted just slightly. Over the next week, Paxton kept his word. He worked sunup to sundown, never asked questions, never pried. He made Ephraim laugh once, really laugh, by pretending to fall into the water trough. He carried Ellie on his shoulders when her little legs gave out in the fields. And when Keziah's hand slipped while chopping wood and blood ran down her palm, he wrapped it gentle like she was made of glass. She tried not to notice the way he watched her sometimes, not with hunger, but with something steadier, quieter, like he was memorizing the way she moved. One night after the children were asleep, she found him sitting by the fire behind the barn, staring up at the stars. She handed him a cup of coffee. "You do not ask much," she said, sitting beside him. "I do not need much. Everyone needs something." He looked at her then, his face half lit by firelight. "I need peace, and I think maybe I found a piece of it here." Keziah looked away, her heart beating faster than it should. "You do not even know me." "I know you stayed," he said. "I know you love those kids like your own blood. I know you work harder than anyone I have met. That is more than I have ever known about someone worth trusting." She swallowed hard. "I have made mistakes, so have I." They sat in silence. The fire cracked. A breeze rustled the tall grass around them. Then Keziah said softly, "I was told once that no one would marry a girl like me." Paxton turned to her, his eyes steady. "I did not ask." She looked at him, her throat tight. "Why?" "Because I already knew the answer." He reached out then, slow and sure, and took her hand, just held it, and for the first time in years, Keziah exhaled without bracing for the world to fall apart. The first snow came early, drifting soft and silent over the dry land like it had been waiting on some private signal. Keziah stood at the edge of the paddock, her coat tied tight around her waist, watching Paxton tighten the last of the roof shingles on the chicken coop. He moved with a quiet purpose, hammer steady, boots planted firm. She hadn't asked him to fix it. He'd just seen the sag, noted the storm coming, and fetched the ladder. Behind her, Ephraim and Ellie crouched near the porch steps, trying to catch snowflakes on their tongues. Ellie giggled, her mittened hands waving toward the sky. Ephraim didn't laugh, but he didn't flinch either, and that was something. "Roof'll hold now," Paxton said, climbing down. "Won't be pretty, but it'll keep the hens dry." Keziah nodded once. "They don't care how it looks." He brushed snow from his sleeves. "You got enough wood split to last the week, just about. I'll take the sled out tomorrow and bring back more." He paused, glancing toward the pasture. "That pine near the creek's ready to come down." She didn't argue. He knew the land now, where the ground turned soft near the ravine, which trees leaned too far west, where the soil held just enough water to plant come spring. He listened more than he spoke, and he paid attention in ways she was not used to. Keziah shifted her weight, her boots crunching into the frozen earth. "You ever stay in one place long?" Paxton's gaze didn't move from the pasture. "I did once." "What happened?" He turned then, quiet for a moment. "She died. Fever took her fast." "That was 5 winters ago." Keziah looked down, snow catching in the folds of her coat. "You had children?" "No," she nodded, not sure what to say. The wind picked up, brushing hair across her face. She hated how her voice turned soft when she didn't mean it to. "You never settled again?" "I tried, didn't fit." "Why here?" "You didn't ask anything of me." She studied him. "That's all it takes." "No." He flexed his gloved hands, then met her eyes. "But it's a start." Later that day, she found him in the barn tending to the bay mare, the one she couldn't ride anymore since the limp set in. He moved around the animal with a kind touch, murmuring something low and steady that she couldn't hear from the doorway. "You think she'll pull through?" she asked. "She's not done yet." Keziah stepped closer, brushing hay from the stall rail. "You always this sure of things?" "No, but I've seen worse come right." The lantern light cast long shadows across his jaw, made the barn feel warmer than it was. She watched him test the mare's legs, slow and gentle, her throat tightened. "I never thought I'd rely on anyone again," she said. "I'm not asking you to." "You didn't have to." He looked at her then, hands still on the mare's withers. "You don't believe in second chances?" "I don't trust him." Paxton straightened. Neither do I, but I've learned to take 'em when they come walking up to my door. Keziah leaned back against the post, drawing in the scent of hay and horse and cold earth. You think that's what this is? I think this is a place worth staying. They stood there, not speaking. Snow tapped against the barn roof, steady and slow. That night they ate by firelight. Ellie fell asleep curled in Keziah's lap, her tiny breath warm against her chest. Ephraim sat close to Paxton, eyes half closed but not asleep. The boy had taken to him like roots to water, slow but deep. After the children were tucked in, Keziah lingered by the hearth, arms wrapped around herself. Paxton rose from his place near the fire and crossed to her. I can take the cot in the barn again, he said. She shook her head. The lean-to's warmer, wind gets in less. He didn't move. You sure? I wouldn't say it if I wasn't. He nodded, then reached for his coat. Before he turned, she spoke again. I used to think love was something wild, big. Loud. Paxton paused, his hand on the door frame. But maybe it's quieter than that, she said. Maybe it's just someone who shows up and stays. He looked back at her, eyes steady. I'm not going anywhere. She didn't answer, just nodded once, and that was enough. The wind had settled by the third week of December, leaving the land hushed beneath a soft crust of snow. Keziah woke before the children stirred, the pale light of dawn threading through the warped window panes. She moved quietly, pulling on her boots and stepping out into the cold with a tin bucket in each hand. The air snapped against her skin, but she didn't flinch. Paxton was already at the pump, steam rising from his breath. He handed her a bucket without a word. Their hands brushed, just briefly, and she didn't pull away. I'll take the east trough, he said. She nodded and turned toward the barn without looking back. Later, as the sun edged higher and the children began to stir, Keziah stood at the stove stirring cornmeal into a bubbling pot. Ellie sat on the floor beside her, humming tunelessly as she stacked wooden spools into a crooked tower. Ephraim hovered near the window, watching Paxton work the fence line with a coil of wire slung over his shoulder. He fixed the gate hinge, he said suddenly. Keziah glanced over. Did he? Yesterday, said it was catching too hard. She set the spoon down. He notices things. He doesn't talk too much. No, he doesn't. Ephraim pressed his forehead to the glass. He's not like the others. Keziah didn't answer. She ladled the cornmeal into bowls and set them on the table. As the children sat down, she poured coffee into 2 mugs. When she stepped outside, Paxton was kneeling by a fence post, his gloves tucked into his coat pocket. She walked to him, the mugs warm against her palms. You didn't eat, she said. He glanced up. Didn't feel hungry. She handed him a mug. Eat anyway. He took it, nodding once. She stood beside him, the silence between them easy now. He sipped, then turned slightly toward her. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked. I did once. What stopped you? The children, he nodded, eyes on the horizon. I've seen folks run from everything except the thing that matters, which is whatever keeps you upright when everything else falls in. Keziah looked at him, her breath catching a little in her throat. You think that's what this is? I think you haven't fallen yet. They finished their coffee in silence. That afternoon, Keziah hitched the sled and rode into town for salt and kerosene. She left the children with Paxton, something she hadn't done before, not fully. Not without herself within sight. When she returned, she found them sitting near the hearth, Ephraim holding a carved wooden horse and Ellie nestled in Paxton's lap with a quilt wrapped around her. The room smelled of stew, and coals glowed low in the stove. You carved that? She asked, nodding toward the toy. Paxton looked up. He found my knife and asked. She set the supplies by the door. You're good with your hands. He didn't answer right away. Then, spent a few years working timber out near Rawlins. Learned to make things that lasted. She stepped closer. You think this will? He met her eyes. I wouldn't still be here if I didn't. She didn't speak. Just stood there, the weight of her coat still clinging to her shoulders. That night, while the children slept, they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, the stars sharp against the black sky. Paxton leaned back, arms folded, his breath rising in slow clouds. I never asked what brought you west, Keziah said. He didn't answer at first. Then I had a brother, younger. We fought in the war together. He didn't make it back. She didn't look at him, just listened. I couldn't go home after that. Nothing there fit anymore. Where was home? Missouri, near the river, she nodded. I was born on the trail. Never had a place that didn't move. Maybe this is it. She turned then, her voice low. You think I could be enough? He didn't hesitate. You already are, her breath caught, even with everything I've done, everything I carry. I don't want a woman without fire in her, he said. I want the one who stayed. She reached for his hand and for the first time didn't feel the need to explain herself. Inside, the house was warm. The shutters clicked softly in the wind. Paxton followed her in without a word, his hand never leaving hers. And when she turned to face him in the quiet of the kitchen, nothing needed saying. He leaned in, slow and certain, and kissed her like he'd been waiting for the right moment, not the perfect one. When they parted, Keziah rested her forehead against his. I didn't think I'd get to have this. You were told wrong, he said. She smiled. You didn't ask. I didn't need to. They stood there, side by side, the promise of morning already stirring in the dark. The new year pressed down quiet and hard, its weight not in noise but in everything left unsaid. Keziah laid out the dried beans to soak while Paxton lifted Ellie into the chair beside the hearth, her legs still too short to climb without help. The girl reached for a cloth doll, its yarn hair fraying at the ends, and Paxton straightened with a slight wince at his ribs. You're stiff, Keziah said, not looking up. Tree came down heavier than it looked, he said. She poured water into the basin and wiped her hands dry. You should rest. Not tired. Didn't ask if you were. He didn't reply, but when she crossed the room to press her palm to his side, he didn't pull back. She felt the tightness there swelling under the skin, edged with heat. You cracked something, she said. Maybe. She stepped away, fetched the willow bark from the shelf, crushed it into warm water and handed it to him. You'll drink this. He took the cup, holding it but not yet sipping. You always talk like a general, she set the pestle aside. Only when folks don't listen. He drank without arguing. Outside, the wind cut low across the yard, dragging bits of straw along the frozen ground. Ephraim had taken to building a wall of snow bricks near the barn, his gloves soaked through, cheeks raw with cold. Keziah watched from the window. He wasn't hiding anymore, he was building something. Paxton set the empty cup down. He's steady with his hands. He doesn't rush. Good trait, she nodded. You teach him knives, I'll teach him books. Paxton leaned back slightly, his eyes still on the boy. He needs both. That night after supper in silence, Keziah unlatched the small trunk beside her bed. Inside, bundled in faded calico, was her mother's shawl. She unfolded it slowly, letting the scent of cedar rise up. Paxton stood by the door, his coat half on. You want time alone, I'll give it. No, she said. I want you to see something. He stepped in as she lifted a worn envelope from beneath the shawl. The paper had yellowed, the ink bled faint at the corners. My mother wrote this before she passed. I never showed it to anyone. Paxton didn't speak. Keziah unfolded the letter and read aloud, her voice steady. Don't let yourself be whittled down to fit where you don't belong. They'll call it pride, but it's the only thing that'll keep your spine straight. She folded it again, careful at the seams. I didn't understand it at 12. I do now. Paxton's voice was quiet. You think I'll try to change you? I think most men would if they stayed long enough. I'm not most men. I know. She tucked the letter away and latched the trunk. The fire behind them cracked once, sharp and quick. Tell me something I don't know, she said. He took a breath. I used to sleep with a rifle across my chest, woke up reaching for it more nights than I can count. Keziah leaned against the bed frame. You still do? Not lately. She studied him. Why not? He didn't move. Because I'm not waiting for something to go wrong anymore. Outside, the livestock stirred in the barn. A horse shifted, a hinge creaked. The world held still. Keziah crossed the floor, her bare feet silent on the planks. She stopped in front of him, looking up into the face that had become familiar in a way nothing else had ever been. "You ever think about marrying again?" she asked. "I think about you. That's not an answer." "I don't need another one." Her breath caught just slightly, but she didn't let it show. "You'd take a girl like me." No preacher's blessing, no white dress. I'd take the woman who stayed, stood her ground, and raised 2 children with a spine straighter than any sermon could give. I don't have much. You have everything I've been looking for. She didn't reach for his hand, didn't need to. Then stay. Not just through winter. I wasn't planning on leaving in spring. He stepped forward, close enough for her to feel the heat rising off him from the fire. "I want to build something here, with you, not just fix what's broken," she nodded once. "Then we'll build slow, strong," his voice dropped. "With roots deep enough to hold." She pressed her forehead to his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, careful of his side. They stood like that until the fire burned low and the quiet wrapped around them like a promise. No declarations, just presence, no need for asking, only staying. By late February, the snow had crusted over hard enough to walk without sinking. The days stretched longer, light lingering over the flats until the wind settled into dusk. Keziah stood at the edge of the pasture, her shawl drawn tight, watching Paxton and Ephraim move together through the drifted rows near the fence line. The boy walked steadier now, his shoulders less drawn, his steps less cautious. They were checking the traps. Paxton had laid 2 mornings back small game, nothing more, and Ephraim carried the empty sack with both hands like it meant something. Paxton knelt beside a snare and motioned the boy forward. Keziah couldn't hear what he said, but Ephraim nodded, crouched, and undid the line himself. She turned back toward the house before they saw her watching. Inside, Ellie was curled in her cot, thumb tucked under her cheek, her breath fogging the patchwork quilt. Keziah knelt and pressed her lips to the girl's temple. Then she rose and went to the hearth, where the stew had gone thick at the edges. She stirred it slowly, letting the scent of onion and broth rise. The fire cracked low, and she added another split log. By the time the door creaked open, snow melting in Paxton's beard and Ephraim's cheeks ruddy with cold, the meal was waiting. They ate quiet. Ephraim leaned into Paxton's shoulder without thinking, a gesture so natural it made Keziah's throat tighten. She didn't speak on it. Just poured another ladle into his bowl and brushed Ellie's hair off her brow when the girl stirred. After supper, Paxton lingered near the table while Keziah wiped the bowls clean. The children were tucked in, the wind outside moving softer now, like it had finally tired itself out. "You ever think about teaching?" he asked, watching her wring out the cloth. She raised an eyebrow. "Teaching what? Books, letters. You read better than anyone I've met." She folded the cloth and hung it to dry. "There's not much call for it out here. There will be more families coming west every season." Keziah leaned against the cupboard. "It's not something I've thought on. You should." He stepped closer, not crowding but near enough to warm the space between them. "You've got more to offer than grit and good aim." She looked up at him. "And what makes you think I want more?" His eyes didn't waver. "Because I've watched you. You listen close. You don't say more than you mean, and you don't waste time dreaming unless you're sure it's worth it." Her heart beat slower, steadier, like it was settling into something known. "You think it's worth it?" "I think you are." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for the tin box near the window. Inside it, wrapped in muslin and tucked beneath a folded scrap of lace, was a small brass ring. Plain, worn smooth at the edges, her father's once. He'd given it to her the day she turned 17. Told her to keep it until she found something she didn't want to lose. She held it up. "I've had this a long time." Paxton didn't move, didn't speak. She crossed the room and placed it in his palm. "I want you to give it back to me when the time is right." He closed his fingers around it. "It's right now." She watched him, the firelight softening the lines at his brow, the steadiness in his eyes anchoring her. "Then do it proper." He didn't kneel, didn't stammer. He just reached for her hand, slid the ring over her finger and said, "I'll take your days slow or hard, bright or bitter. However they come, I'll be here." She rested her forehead to his. "You already are." They married 2 weeks later, quiet and without ceremony, under a cottonwood that hadn't yet shed its frost. A preacher from Sweetwater came out with a Bible and a flask, and the children stood close, Ephraim holding Ellie's hand like she might fly off if he let go. There was no music, no feast. Just the wind, the sky, and the sound of Keziah's voice saying yes. Paxton built a second room onto the house that spring, said it was for the children, but Keziah knew he did it so they'd all have space to breathe. She planted corn and onions while he replaced the barn roof. They spent their evenings on the porch, boots off, his hand resting on the curve of her knee, her head against his shoulder. Ephraim learned to ride on the bay mare that had once limped too heavy. Ellie grew into her laughter, chasing chickens barefoot across the yard. Keziah taught them both their letters by lamplight, while Paxton whittled toys from pine scraps and told stories about rivers with names too long to remember. One summer evening, after the children had gone quiet and the fireflies had begun to stir, Keziah sat with her feet in Paxton's lap, the stars overhead thick as spilled salt. "You ever miss the road?" she asked. He shook his head. "I found what I was looking for." She turned her face toward him. "And what was that?" "Solid ground, and someone to walk it with." She leaned in, kissed him slow and sure, her fingers threaded into the collar of his shirt. "You're not going anywhere." He smiled at her, the kind that didn't need words, and he never did.